can see from here is a whole load of servers and server racks. All of these are generating heat. The more work a server does, the more heat it will generate. So what we need to do is we need to manage airflow within this data center. Because cold air is generally heavier than hot air, typically the air comes in when it is cold through the ground and leaves through the ceiling. From here, what you can see is a number of server cabinets. They are facing in different directions deliberately. You can see that some are sort of back to back to each other. The idea here is that we have certain cold channels and certain hot channels, where effectively what we are doing is we are making sure that certain parts are where the cold air can flow evenly through the data center, and we also need to have routes where the hot air can escape. So where we're at, we are looking at where the cold air comes in. Where we're going to look at next is where the hot air goes out. Now we're at the third point in this data center. We are now at where the hot air comes out. Now this is typically done higher up in the sort of physical establishment because hot air rises. Now we need to manage this. You might notice from here that there are certain plastic sort of guides on these server cabinets. Now the point of this is to kind of guide hot air to the right location, so the heating, ventilation, air conditioning system can quite easily suck the hot air out. Now there are other factors to consider as well when it comes to these sort of systems. It's not just airflow. You've got to consider things like humidity. It can't be too wet because we're looking at rust. It can't be too dry because we're looking at static electricity and charges and just general electronic nastiness. So what we've got here is a number of different mechanisms in place that this heating, ventilation and air conditioning control system is important for. Now we're going to have a look at a potential server rack. Now typically what we have in here is a number of key components. As previously shown, we have patch panels. There will be a number of cables coming in either back, via the floor or various other locations. The patch panels are there to make it easy to connect and know where you're connecting to. The switches actually provide the connectivity, as we saw earlier. What we haven't seen yet is different kinds of servers. Now there's quite a few different kinds of form factors for servers, one of which is a rack server. Rack servers are specifically designed to fit in these cabinets. Another way of doing it is known as a blade server. These are effectively cards that are plugged into an enclosure. Blades provide a lot more processing power in a much smaller cabinet space. Unfortunately, because they are providing that much power, heating and cooling becomes a problem. So we need to be very, very careful with providing services such as air conditioning, cooling and airflow. There is one final component at the bottom of this server cabinet, which is known as a UPS, or uninterruptible power supply. It's a glorified battery. What it does is it charges over time. Now when power is lost, if power is lost, the UPS kicks in. It is not a generator, it does not generate power. It is a battery that has a certain amount of charge. The purpose of this piece of kit is while the power is off, the servers can get themselves into a safe state. They can shut down safely. Or we can turn on a backup generator so we don't have to shut down the server. One of the biggest problems in a data center is if things turn off unexpectedly and data starts getting corrupted. The UPS plays a massive role in making sure we're not accidentally losing power and therefore losing the service. Power is one of the key important parts of a data center. Naturally, with electronics, electricity is useful. There's more to it than this. We want to be able to have safe shutdowns. We want to have circuits that are isolated. We want to have a proper power input which manages all of the power that these devices are actually using. There are a lot of devices in here, and therefore electricity depending on the scale of the company and the scale of the data center, you might have a number of transformers, a number of generators, depending on how much is required. Data centers charge based on amount of availability. They actually provide a service based on availability loss over a year. So when we started to look at data centers, we started to look at things like high availability. Now what we are actually looking at in terms of numbers is downtimes of less than 3 seconds a year. Kind of hard to provide if there is a power cut. So what we need to do is we need to have a look at having backup power, generators, big batteries, and ways of providing the high availability that data centers tend to charge for. Now coming back to the purpose of a data center, there are a variety of different models for what this sort of establishment is trying to provide. Okay, so some companies have their own data centers where they might be hosting their own websites, might be having their own clusters of databases, that sort of thing. This might be how they host a variety of different network services, whether it's internet or various other things. Netflix will have their own, which provides that sort of streaming service. Now another model, if we're looking at data centers, is cloud. Now there are a variety of different ways we can actually provide as a service models. Whether you are renting out the hardware as an infrastructure as a service model, or you are actually providing an entire platform, an entire website builder, you can sell everything under the sun. You can sell everything from infrastructure to the servers and the hosting, depending on what your customer would like. What this means is we have to look at designing and building this data center